Welcome to the Hardcore MBA podcast with your host, Erland Bakke. Would you like to have a free copy of the #1 international best-selling book, Never Work Again? All you have to do is rate, review, and subscribe to Hardcore MBA podcast on iTunes and email us a screenshot of your review to erland@mroutsource.com.
Hello, it is Erland here. I am signing in from London. And today I am very excited. Today is all about play. You know, you do business, you think, one day when I'm successful, rich, and I have a Lamborghini, I'm going to be really, really happy. But is that really the case? Well, for some people it is. And today I've invited Charlie Hoehn, who is in Austin, Texas. He has worked for many of the most successful marketeers in the world. Amongst them are Seth Godin, Ramit Sethi, and Tucker Max. He has also worked for somebody you might have heard of called Tim Ferriss, the author of The 4-Hour Workweek, The 4-Hour Body, and The 4-Hour Chef. Now, Charlie worked with Tim for 3 years and helped him sell millions and millions of books. He's also been part of a multi-million-dollar product launch called App Empire. And today he is working on helping people get the job they really, really want and enjoy. Charlie, how are you?
Good, Erland. Thanks for having me.
So I'm really, really fascinated by your concept around play. I actually also worked myself into the ground around 5 years ago, where I actually had a really big panic attack on the underground here in London during rush hour while attending a conference on how to be more successful, which is an interesting combination, right?
Right.
But so many things that you wrote about in that book really, really resonated with me. So can you explain to me why you wrote the book?
Yeah. I went through basically exactly what you just described about yourself. So I spent years working with these awesome people on these amazing opportunities, and by every external measure, people were validating that you're successful, and it felt good to have that to have your ego stroked, and to feel like you were winning at something that was your own game. And I kind of along the way, I got more and more into bad habits and patterns of staying indoors all day, staring at a screen, interacting with people mostly through a screen, kind of the way you and I are doing right now, and drinking tons of caffeine, staying up super late, and at the end of the day, just being socially isolated. Not really ever moving, not really sleeping, and not having as much like guilt-free fun. Whenever I would do something fun, I felt guilty about not working and not being productive, which was really kind of torturous to do to yourself. As we live in in the States, it's very productivity obsessed, and everybody is hell-bent on working for more money, more success, and it really, it kind of never ends. And a lot of that pressure is placed on us in our minds. But anyway, I started kind of breaking down, and I remember I had a panic attack one night, and it was just a miserable experience. And it went on for a long time, right? This feeling that I was like losing my mind, that I was dying, this anxious feeling of being around people that I'd never had before in my life, and I tried everything to get out of it. I was kind of ashamed of it. I didn't tell anybody I was going through it, and except my doctor, who tried to prescribe me to pretty dangerous drugs, which I didn't end up taking, but I tried everything to kind of get myself out naturally, because I knew created those conditions on some level. And for a year and a half, 2 years, nothing really worked. And I remember my girlfriend one night just saying, like, "You're not the guy I met. What happened to you?"
Wow.
And it was the first time I said to somebody, like what I was going through, and I said, "I feel dead inside all the time, and I just don't know how to fix it." And she started crying, and I remember thinking, like, why can't I do that? Like, why can't I cry? I feel broken, emotionally broken. And long story short, I ended up stumbling across a book called Play by Stuart Brown, and it's more of an academic book on how play shapes the mind, but it really resonated, and it felt like I'd missed something so obvious, all along, that humans need to play. We have the biggest brains of any mammal. We play more than any other mammal. It's how we bond. It's how we learn. It's how we decompress. It's how we form neural connections and become more creative and actually, paradoxically, more productive. And so as soon as I started playing on a daily basis, incorporating that back into my life, along with a couple other lifestyle changes, I was back to my normal self within a month. That's why I wrote the book.
And what kind of play should we be doing? Because, you watch House of Cards and you have, I'm not saying this is a guy we should emulate, but the, I can't remember his name now, but Kevin Spacey, the Kevin Spacey character, he plays Xbox, right? Is that a good form of play, or is that not the kind of play that we're actually looking for?
It can be, but it's not ideal, right? When you're playing Xbox, it's typically done in solitude, indoors, sitting still for hours and hours, right? And not really interacting with the world. But playing video games has been proven to be very therapeutic, and it can also be a social activity. What I recommend people do, to me, the ideal forms of play are doing stuff outside, connected to the earth. So you're like barefoot in a park, you're moving around, and you're running around, and you're playing with somebody else, a sport of some kind. So I like playing catch with an aerobie flying disc, just because they have enough air that they fly all over the place, and you end up running around a lot. I also like playing, pick-up basketball games or pick-up soccer.
What does that mean for our international audience? Pick-up basketball, what does that mean?
It just means an informal game. Okay. But, I mean, you can't always organize those easily, especially if you've been socially isolated for a long time or you're living in a new city or whatever and you don't know a lot of people. In that case, just pay to play. Sign up for a group. I signed up for improv 2 years ago. That was one of the better decisions I've made because, socially it gives you... For anxious people who don't spend enough time around other people, they tend to be socially isolated. Improv is one of the better things you can do because you get in an environment where you're failing safely, and you're just laughing, you're goofing off, you're having fun. So, not to say that sports and improv are the two best. They're the ones that worked really well for me. What I recommend generally to people is they sit down and they write out their play history. What were the things that you repeatedly and voluntarily turned to when you were a kid that no adult was forcing you to do? No one was judging you. No one was grading you. No one was giving you a trophy to do it. You just did it for the sake of doing it because it was fun and rewarding for you intrinsically. And once you know what that short list is, I mean, for me, it was playing catch, playing home run derby, which is just basically batting practice, creating art, building stuff with my hands, and filming funny sketches with my friends. So improv fulfilled two of those, right? Creating art, doing funny sketches with my friends, and then playing catch and home run derby. My friend and I would just go to the park and hit balls and play catch. So in group sports, I signed up for basketball. So I filled my week with several hours of that. And any opportunity that rose up, any business opportunity, I looked at that as a potential opportunity to play. So, for instance, a guy emailed me and he said, "Hey, do you want to go grab coffee?" I responded back to him with, "Hey, why don't we go play catch in the park instead? It's a little bit more stimulating. It's really nice weather out. It'll be a lot of fun." And he responded so positively. And I find that practically all adults respond positively to these suggestions that we do something more fun than the typical routine of sitting in a cafe and drinking more coffee. Everybody's deprived of play and movement and guilt-free fun social interactions on some level as an adult. And humans just don't function very well when they're deprived of that stuff for too long.
I know Steve Jobs used to do a lot of walking. He would do a lot of walking meetings. Walked around Palo Alto, and I actually wrote that down now to book walking meetings with people. That's actually something I'm gonna start doing. A
reader actually. I mean, Stanford just published that walking meetings produce 2 times more creative responses than sitting meetings. So if you're doing a brainstorming session, it makes total sense to do walking meetings. And in general, it's just a good idea. It's men tend to process these interactions with other men differently than women do. Women are very much they're very good at social support. So sitting around, making eye contact with each other is important. Men actually tend to have stronger interactions when they're walking side by side together, looking out at the same horizon.
The hunters.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and like that shouldn't be downplayed. Like men tend to interact better when they're walking side by side rather than sitting and staring each other in the face, because on a primal level, that's somewhat confrontational. Unless you're sitting down over a meal or something, men just didn't make extended eye contact with each other really as much as women did. So
I find it really interesting when two women meet each other, just to observe, because they just scan each other really fast. It's really interesting.
You'll also notice that women are immediately jumping on complimenting each other, even if on some level it's not totally sincere. There's like this instantaneous attempt to support, socially connect, and that's critical. Women are very good at supporting each other socially.
So do you think anxiety in the form that you had, in terms of like isolating yourself, is that a male? Is this very common amongst entrepreneurs in the world, male entrepreneurs, to have anxiety and anxiety attacks?
For sure. There's the United States is the most anxious nation in the world. It really is. Anxiety levels here are higher than they were during the Cold War.
It's because of Fox News, man. It's Fox News.
It's a lot of things. Yeah, that's a big reason. Actually, you're absolutely right there. I couldn't agree more. The news, I think, is one of the most toxic elements of our culture. It makes everybody afraid of each other, and it grossly exaggerates the world.
This podcast is brought to you by MrOutsource.com. Outsourcing to the Philippines done for you.
In the negative parts of the world. For instance, 60% of all deaths are related to nutrition and diet, while less than 1% are related to homicide and murder. What does the news cover?
Wow.
Homicide and murder every single night. it's irrelevant. It's distorted. To your original question, are entrepreneurs facing this? Yeah, I mean, anxiety and depression are the two most prescribed mental illnesses in the world. They're, multi-billion-dollar industries. And entrepreneurs tend to lend themselves to these mental illnesses, or they tend to get these mental illnesses because they deprive themselves of sleep. In their mind, nothing's ever really enough. They're constantly living in the future or regretting the past, generally speaking. There's a lot of stress. And now the modern entrepreneur spends most of his day staring at a computer, right? There's no building with the hands. There's no constant social meetings with people that their tribe. We'll abandon our families, we'll abandon our friends in pursuit of doing these digital endeavors of success. And so, and also they tend to be malnourished on some level. In the United States, our soil's been depleted. Over 85% of the minerals and the nutrients that used to get replenished through natural farming practices have been eliminated. So a carrot is not a carrot anymore.
Not only that, though, like people don't actually know what to eat, right? So they'll be putting in themselves like a steak and thinking, oh, this is going to give me lots of protein so I can do lots of great work, but it makes you dumb, basically, and tired.
Right. There's a lot of confusion surrounding diet for good reason. The food industry's kind of destroyed the quality of our food, and so these things that historically have been great and fine to eat, such as meat, which humans have been eating for millions of years, are now totally destroyed. They have no nutritional value, or we got factory farms and all this stuff. Anyway, you are what you eat, so to speak, and anxious people with mental illnesses tend to not have great nutrition. And one of the ways that I discovered this was I did a micronutrient test called SpectraCell. If you look up SpectraCell, SpectraCell, it's a few $100s, and it tells you all of the nutrients that you're deficient in. And a couple of the ones that really stood out to me were vitamin B12, which is very, very common in people who are chronically stressed. That nutrient tends to get depleted very quickly. It's also common. I forget the other correlation.
Do you need long hair to do this one? Because there's one that you need long hair, and I'm going to struggle.
No, this is a blood test.
Oh, it's a blood test. Okay,
it's not a hair test. Though hair tests can be good. But anyway, it showed a number of deficiencies that I had, and when I reintroduced vitamin B12 and excess omega-3 fatty acids, so I was taking a high quality type of fish oil. Or cod liver oil. As soon as I did that, actually within a week or two, I think it was about 10 days, I noticed a significant difference in my clarity of thought. And I felt less stressed. And I genuinely don't think it was the placebo, because as soon as I had another blood test, my B12 levels were back to normal. So that is something that absolutely you should look into. Everybody, I think, should look into, because every nation on some level has had this issue of nutrients and minerals and all these things that have been done away with because of hyper-aggressive agricultural and mining practices, and in general major shifts in the Earth's environment. Our food comes from the earth, and when the earth changes so much, it changes what we get into our bodies. So look into what your levels are, because it can absolutely radically change how you feel.
It's interesting how we will service our cars, right? So The lamp will go on in your car, and you'll go, oh, I'll go to the auto place to get it checked, and they'll tell me what to improve on, or change some tires. But when it comes to our own body, like very, very few people will do tests on their body without being like, oh, my nose fell off. It's like, okay, it's interesting though. I used to do a lot of testing before. I did a blood test actually last week, which tells me about my fatty acid levels in my body. A friend of mine, he's an entrepreneur, he made this fish oil, which is really good. But I'm from Norway, and he's from like the West Coast where they have all the fish. So they made this fish oil, and part of the test is like testing your fatty acid level, which is interesting.
Interesting. Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right, though. I mean, it's like if your body was a Mercedes, you wouldn't expect it to run well if you were dumping a mix of vinegar and oil and gasoline and milk and stuff in it. Like, that's what humans do on a lot of levels, right? We dump in all this random stuff into our bodies. The one thing that we have control over, and we wonder why we feel terrible. It's like you have to consider that, you're not a walking garbage can. You have to be able to process properly what you're throwing into you. And we've evolved for a long time with certain foods being more nourishing than others, but very, very few things that we eat now are in their natural ideal state. So
this podcast is brought to you by MrOutsource.com. Outsourcing to the Philippines done for you.
You either have to come up with a game plan to get more nutrients naturally, which is really hard and expensive, or come up with supplements to help mitigate against a lack of nutrition that you're getting.
So one of the things that changed for me after first of all, my panic attack scared me big time. Itself, and I really didn't want to have another one because the effect for me was like I thought I was having a massive heart attack.
Yep.
And I went to the hospital, and they did lots of tests, and I was like, "You just had a panic attack. Go home." But they didn't. They didn't. I'm not shifting blame here. I'm just saying there was no information about. I think they gave me some subscription for something, but I was just like, I'm not going to take pills for something I should be fixing mentally.
Right.
So I changed some habits, and one thing that shifted for me was like I got very focused on my own health. So I focused on taking care of myself first, and then making money. Because before that, it was like make money, I'll take care of my health later. And what I've noticed like over the years now is like I'm still taking great care of my health, but I'm more now back on the money. So what kind of, how did you change your habits? What were the habits that you incorporated, and in what sort of order did that happen?
Yeah, the first thing that I did was I started playing again. Play, I think, is the force multiplier that's more important than effectively anything else. Humans are social animals, and we desperately need fun interactions with each other. We need to bond with each other. And we tend to really deprive ourselves of these longer interactions with each other that are centered around fun, usually. Our association with play as adults tends to be binge drinking, depending on the culture that you're in, right? And that's sitting around pouring depressants down your throat, which it has its place. But for people struggling with anxiety or depression, that's not the type of play that you need in your life, right? So play was the first thing that I started incorporating, which was having guilt-free fun with people I liked, right, on a continual basis. And I would suggest for anybody who's doing that, sit down, do the play history exercise, and then incorporate it into your schedule. And I actually even went so far as having virtual assistants on fancyhands.com, setting up a monthly recurring task for them to purchase group play for me. So basketball, improv lessons, whatever, and put it into my schedule to ensure that I got at least 5 hours a week. And now I actually host a weekly recess where for 3 hours every week, a group of friends and we meet up in the park, we just play catch, we goof off, we have fun and hang out with each other. And then afterwards, we might grab dinner or grab a drink. And that's really helped a lot. You have to have that social element more than anything else. You have to feel connected to friends, family, community. And if you're not making steps to spend your time there, then you're really setting yourself up for chronic loneliness and isolation, which has been proven to be deadlier than smoking 15 cigarettes a day or being obese. So it's not a joke, right? To let yourself stay lonely and isolated. Have that be the first step.
Have you read The Upside of Stress?
No, but I might know the thesis behind it. But tell me about it.
Yeah, so part of that book was basically describing how, because we're fancy apes, if we feel like we're failing or we're not part of a tribe, we isolate. We move out of the tribe and we start isolating ourselves. And the more we isolate ourselves, we don't feel like we're part of something. We're actually telling our body more and more. Like depression kind of tells your body that you're not worthy of survival.
Mm-hmm.
So your brain is telling your body to die, basically.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. Yeah.
Which brings back to like the cigarette example. So you can be like, you could be eating really healthy food and you could be exercising, you could be doing all these things, but like if you're not happy, you're still gonna and you feel isolated and you're not part of a tribe. And by the way, guys, if you haven't found a tribe, you can start your own tribe. By hosting dinner parties, just connecting with people at events that appeal to you, and because I felt really really isolated when I had my attack, because I was living in Norway, and I actually left to go to San Francisco because I just needed to get away and create a new tribe for myself. So I started hanging out with very different types of people in San Francisco than I was hanging out with in Norway. Right. Sorry, I interrupted you, but step number...
No. You're totally right. You can create your own tribe. It takes effort, and for somebody who might be really stressed, feeling anxious, it can be kind of exhausting, to do that. So, like unfortunately, in modern industrialized societies, we don't get handed a lot of cards for having a tribe, right? So the best thing you can do for a temporary fix that's totally good enough is to sign up for these groups that pay to be in these groups that meet up to have fun and are very supportive.
So you would actually pay to be a member of a group, not just go to Meetup?
Absolutely. No, Meetup sucks. I've had bad experiences on Meetup, and I've had a couple good ones, but you need to have a group that you consistently show up for, that you're going to feel bad if you miss. So this is okay. So you made a great point earlier when you said that when you're socially isolated and your brain is telling you you're not good enough, like you're not a part of the tribe. That is the exact reason why soldiers have PTSD, why they carry it around with them. They've done numerous studies where on mammals that have these traumas. When they're socially isolated after the trauma, they stay traumatized indefinitely. Whereas if they're integrated back into a community, they get over the trauma within a few days. This is why soldiers do actually better and are mentally and emotionally healthier when they're at war, because they're with a tribe of people. But when they come back to their country and all of a sudden they're alone in their apartment, surrounded by people who have no idea what they just went through, their mind starts telling them that they no longer have a mission. No one gets me. No one cares. and they become bitter, and they actually carry around this post-traumatic stress for a long time, which they don't need to carry it around, because if they'd just gone through some sort of communal therapy, some form of group therapy, it's actually much more effective than they think at dissolving that post-traumatic stress. And it's really tragic, because there have been estimates that 22 soldiers kill themselves per day, 22 wow. suicides a day. And that's for the United States, in medical costs and in productivity losses, that's $16 billion a year. And I actually spoke at the Pentagon, and I've spoken at several military bases on my frustration with how this problem is being handled. They've spent $50 million in researching the problem, and over $500 million in prescribing anti-anxiety pills, anti-depression pills, and those drugs can have their place. They can get people through the darkest moments, and they can work. But the reality is for one, communal therapy can really work. It can absolutely work. It's not being done in a systematic way. Two, there's drugs like MDMA, narcotics, class 1 narcotics that people get thrown in jail for, have been proven to have over a I believe it's 95 or 98% success rate at dissolving post-traumatic stress within 2 to 3 sessions. So why aren't there these clinics set up throughout the country or throughout the world where people who've gone through serious traumas, who aren't a part of a tribe, who aren't a part of their community, who don't have close friends and family, they can go to those places and actually experience, they can have their post-traumatic or their traumas resolved by going through these sessions? Or why aren't there communal group therapy places that organize specifically for the people who are at most risk of committing suicide? Soldiers and veterans make up 1 out of 5 suicides in America, and they make up less than, I believe, 0.1% of the population. So it's insane to me that the steps that they've taken. I mean, on one level, I get it, and I know I'm going on a rant here, but suicide is a big deal, right? It is enormously disruptive to communities, and it's rooted in mental illness, which can be absolutely mitigated, reversed, prevented. And this stuff that we're talking about in this interview, the importance of play. What I was going to talk about next is the importance of sleep, and then finally the importance of a feast. Of getting the proper nutrients your body needs to function while eating it with people you care about. Those, I think, are the three pillars if you want to have mental health. And it's really, really simple, but the way we live in an industrial modern society just doesn't allow for it very easily, which is exactly, what I said is, you don't get handed a lot of cards, right? And if you grow up, especially in America, your culture that you live in is very sick. It's not you that's broken, it's the culture that breaks you. And so you have to be the one who engineers and designs your weekly life to look the way you need it to look in order for you to get back to health and happiness, because it's absolutely possible, but it's just hard. So if you focus on play, getting enough play each day, if you focus on getting really good sleep, just optimize your sleep environment so you get 8 to 9 hours a night or total per night, and feast where you get enough nutrients and you're eating meals in cozy environments with people you care about, you can absolutely get back to normalcy in such a short period of time. So that's rant over, I guess.
I thought it was really interesting what you said with the post-traumatic stress with the soldiers, because so they're in the tribe, they come home, and then nobody relates to what they've done, so they feel isolated, and they see the world very differently, and they haven't, so that makes total sense. Also, thinking about Scandinavia has the highest suicide rate in the world.
Does it really?
Also, yeah. Also, like some of the richest countries in the world, but also the highest suicide rate.
Yeah.
I think Norway and Sweden are always like competing to be the best at that. But I was actually thinking, because it's cold, half of the year it's cold, which naturally makes you maybe more isolated. So you instead of going out and being with people, you're saying, oh, no, it's cold outside, it's wet, I'm just going to stay inside. And then people maybe turn down more dinner invitations. I think that could be part of the reason.
Absolutely. I like there's a Danish word, I think it's hygge, where it's like, it translates to coziness. In creating these things with your friends to be cozier, these cozy events with your friends. But yeah, it's such a cold part of the world, and I don't know how much sunlight everybody's getting either, but that vitamin D, natural vitamin D through the sun, that alone can make you depressed. I mean, there's a reason that Seattle has such a high depression and suicide rate in the United States. It's over 200 days of the year are overcast, or it may even be higher than that. It's constantly raining, so yeah, the weather can absolutely make a huge impact. I think there's a reason that Latin Americans are so joyous and happy all the time. They get a ton of sunlight.
And they're social, so social.
Yeah, and
mi
familia,
mi familia, right?
Yeah, exactly. And one other thing I wanted to say, in case people don't believe me on the post-traumatic stress and the suicide relating to soldiers, Israel it's basically a war zone all the time, right? They experience the life of living at war. Everybody does there. They have one of the lowest PTSD rates in the world. It's less than 1%. And the reason is because when they go back into the community, they're integrated. Everybody knows what they've been through. There's no loneliness. There's no mental isolation there. There's no feeling that no one gets me, because everyone gets you, right? So I think it's really tough in the U.S. It's really unfortunate because not only are we separate from each other in a lot of ways, but we're separate from different age groups. I was talking to a friend, when I do the weekly recesses, some people bring their kids, and it's so rejuvenating and refreshing to play soccer with a 12-year-old or a 4-year-old, because they just behave in such a different way as you, and it reminds you to not take yourself so freaking seriously. If you're surrounded by business people and you only interact with business people all the time, and the exact same thing can be said about hanging out with much older people in their 60s, 70s, 80s. There's a perspective shift that you get there by interacting with every part of your community, every different age group. And it's so weird to me that we do that to each other, that we isolate each other, that in school you're required to hang out with people who are just your age, which is like insane, right? When the way we evolved was to learn from the older kids, right, in natural environments, or the adults, right? But we all grow up in this weird, messed up system where we sit in desks around people our age, and we have to sit still, be quiet, and pay attention to the one adult in the front of the room who's just telling us to memorize information, then regurgitate it on command. And so I'm not totally sure where I'm going with this. I'm just kind of talking now, but it's recognizing that you kind of grow up in a system that kind of distorts your view of what life should be like. And tapping back into the whole concept with play, sleep, and feast is just tapping back into what we've done since the dawn of man. Those were the core activities. You know, play allowed us to survive because it gave us a safe, adaptive mechanism to learn these skills and that kept us alive. You know, we would practice hunting and stuff through play. So
you had some really good quotes in the book. One was, take the job you would like. If you were independently wealthy, you're going to do well at it. And that's Warren Buffett.
Yeah, that's Warren Buffett, yeah.
You also had Disney and Steve Jobs as quotes for doing play, but we know that they had a lot of struggle. I mean, Disney, he struggled most of his life, and he died early of heart disease, I believe, or similar. And Jobs died of cancer fairly early. Two very, very successful entrepreneurs that changed the world. And I'm sure that it was their work that, like, they had that perspective on their work. But, like, how do you feel, like, how could they have incorporated more play into their life, and why do you think they died early?
Why they think they died early? I mean, I don't know. I'm not a health professional. I guess in some ways I know a lot about mental health, but I don't know the core roots of why they died early. How they could have incorporated more play into their life? That's okay. So I have to make the distinction here. So in the book, I say that play is not only an act, it's a state of mind. It's the way you approach the world. And whether you approach the world as a frightening prison or a loving playground is totally up to you. So anxiety really does, every disease or many diseases begin and stay rooted in the mind, right?
Right.
There's a book called You Are the Placebo, which is, the placebo effect. Doctors tend to marginalize it like it's this weird thing, but it's like, no, human beings can think themselves into health, right? And so play is the state of mind. In viewing the world as your playground, viewing your work as an opportunity to create a better game for that you want to play on an ongoing basis. That's the goal there. And the quote that always stood out to me was Plato's quote that's, man is God's plaything, and that is the best part of him. Therefore, every man and woman should live life accordingly and play the noblest games. What then is the right way of living? Life must be lived as play. And so it's viewing life as this game. I mean, every moment you get was given to you. You didn't have to do anything to earn it. You're just presented it. And so why treat, and all the people around you, if you'd grown up next door to them, you would be friends with them. Why treat them as these scary strangers or totally different from you? My sister, who's Caucasian like me, Irish German, she's best friends with a Romanian girl just because they grew up together, next door to each other. I mean, there should be no fear in the people around you, and there should be no fear when it comes to your career, right? You should try to create noble games for yourself. Play a noble game, right?
I like that.
I mean, there's
noble game.
Yeah. I mean, the other one that sticks out, and a lot of I'm glad you brought this up. It's like my favorite part of the book are these quotes from the most influential, impactful people who've ever lived, the ones who literally shaped our culture and our society in a lot of ways, is Mark Twain, who said, the work that is really a man's own work is play and not work at all. When we talk about the great workers of the world, we really mean the great players of the world. And it's the people who have leaned into their game and determined to be the best at it. And so you brought up Steve Jobs and Walt Disney, and I think one other guy, I can't remember, but on how they could have incorporated more play into their career. I thought these guys were the epitome of people who incorporated play into their career because their career was play. And I think that I think is the biggest potential we have for ourselves as a species is to make our shift. Human beings are always going to work. I don't think work is something to be avoided. And I think the mindset that work is slavery, work is modern systemic slavery, or work is a chore. I think that the goal should be to have it so that all humans can play for a career and become great at whatever it is that they love to do, because that's going to open up so much more creativity, so much more joy, so much more riches and wealth in our world. The richest, wealthiest people, some of them were people who played for a living. Now you can argue that there's a lot of real estate moguls and people who did all these other things that weren't play at all. They became wealthy.
But I think
like oil tycoons.
No, but when it comes to accountants, I think accountants really like their job. It's play for them. It's a puzzle, right? So they have to take all these numbers. You got to put it into the puzzle. And then you got to see how the puzzle fits together in a larger context. And it's like, it is play. It is a game. Mm-hmm. And I think for real estate people, it is a game too. It's like, what's happening in the market of politics? Are there any tax laws coming? And it's still a game. You're still playing the game. So how do we? Which brings us to what you're working on right now, which is how to get your dream job, how to work for people, how to land a job by working for free. How do we find our play thing? How do we discover what game we should be playing?
So when it comes to the career, this is why I endorse doing free work, right? Because then you can objectively say, I love doing this. I didn't need to get paid to do it. And it was, you can truly test your intrinsic motivation, whether something is fun for you. So that's for my course, which is called Land a Job You Love. And I guess I can give you the link or whatever after if anybody's interested. But perfect, yeah. I endorse doing free work because you get to test whether this is a game that you actually enjoy. And then I teach you how to transition into making it a paid job. But I think the crazy thing is we spend so many years preparing to get hired, waiting to get hired, right? That's what school is preparation to enter into the real world for 17 years, if you go to university. That's crazy. And then when people get out, what do they do now? They spend months blasting out their resume to all these different jobs that they don't even really want. They're just desperately trying to get something, right? I think that is the worst strategy you could have after spending so many years waiting to get hired. That's terrible. Why not choose to spend a little time creating a game that you want to play or figuring out what it is that you want to do? And so what I talk about in my book, Recession Proof Graduate, and in my course is that you need to pick somebody who's playing a game that you really admire, that you want to emulate, that you are naturally drawn to, that you're like, that looks so much fun. And not because of the status, not because of the prestige necessarily associated with it, although that can be a benefit, obviously. But somebody who's doing something noble that you're like, that looks like it could be so much fun. That is aligned with who I am. And then you figure out ways to actually work alongside them on projects or to shadow them or just to be around them and play their game for a while to see if it's something you want to do. I knew from an early age that I wanted to be an inventor or an artist or a creator or a filmmaker or whatever. And I spent a lot of time shadowing and apprenticing those people for free because I wanted to make sure, not even I wanted to make sure, it was just something I wanted to do. It was fun. And I liked getting good at it. And And sure enough, just by doing that stuff for free, I was presented with more and more cool opportunities, and I met better people who knew this stuff even better than I did, like 10 to 100x. And I accelerated my learning. They introduced me to more people, more amazing opportunities. And just by hanging out with those people on an ongoing basis, they often would hire me and pay me. And I got to work, like you said at the beginning of the call, with some of my favorite entrepreneurs, favorite authors, favorite artists, the famous guys that you mentioned, like Tim Ferriss, Tucker Max, and Ramit Sethi. But I also got to work with local entrepreneurs that went on to be stars, people you've never heard of, and local filmmakers that you've never heard of that taught me so much, and they made it more fun for me. So I think that's the smarter approach, is to approach the beginning of your career when you're trying to get started or to reinvent yourself, to spend some time really exploring these games that other people are playing that you think you might want to be able to play too.
It kind of sounds like you started out playful and playing, experimenting, testing, and then you went into this phase of like, I need to be more successful than everybody else that I ever known. And then you've kind of like gone back and you've sort of got to become more playful again. Is that correct? Or?
That's exactly right. It's right on the money.
So where does this ambition and drive to come from? Like I kind of find like my own ambition cripples me often. You know, like so? Next year we're gonna do this amount of money and we're gonna do this. And, you know, and then I try to force it to happen, which loses. Then if you try to force something too much, you lose the magic.
Absolutely. And you know why? In your head, you're saying, I should do this or I have to do this, rather than I choose to do this. It's totally different. One is a slave mentality, right? Of there is a master here and I'm going to feel guilty if I don't do this. Mm-hmm. And that inevitably leads to procrastination, to feelings of guilt and shame if you don't hit your goals, blah, blah, blah. But if you choose to do something, it's very different, right? And you have to ask yourself, like, why do you need to hit that amount of money? You know, is it an arbitrary goal, or is it going to help you with this broader vision that you have to help mankind in some way and to fulfill your purpose and why you're here? And you don't necessarily need to know, like, why you're here or whatever. Like, everybody's in a different part of their journey, right? But my personal, what drives me, I really feel that I'm on a deep level that I'm here to remind mankind of the importance of play and to help them in that effort, because our world is in a severe state of play deficit, and I see it harming us in so many ways, from being afraid of our neighbors to this massive, tremendous waste of human energy and potential in spending most of their lives in jobs that they hate for decades, to our children, to locking them up in what effectively amounts to prisons for kids, and inhibits their learning for so long. I think there's so much untapped potential in what we could be and how much closer together we could be as humans, that I feel so strongly motivated by that.
Do you have a tip on how to, because I knew I was speaking to you, it's basically 5 o'clock here in the UK, so all day I've actually been asking myself the question, like, why... Like, I've incorporated a lot more play into my life since I read your book. I read your book right after it came out.
What kind of stuff do you do, by the way?
Oh, to play?
Yeah.
Okay, so I play tennis. I do Krav Maga. I go to the gym, but I didn't used to attend classes. Now I only attend classes.
Nice.
I do social meetups for entrepreneurs. So I have like these mastermind dinners, and I do them once a month, and they're just cool. Like it's not like let's do business. It's just like I just set up like I ask different questions like what do you really wish you were doing, or wow, like what do you want to do when you're 90, or what's something that's scary. Like just a fun thing. It's like a mastermind for entrepreneurs, but it's not about business. It's about life as an entrepreneur rather than so people can like express themselves.
It's awesome.
We actually play a lot of Words with Friends with my girlfriend. We always have a game going, and she's won like 40 times in a row. But she actually beats the computer as well, so she's pretty good. We actually was writing down because we used to do something called game night in London, which is actually my girlfriend's idea. We play something called Cranium, but you have to mime things and
it's a fun game.
I'm actually going to introduce to my friend Ethan. He does like Game Olympics. He's the owner of Watkins Bookstore, one of the oldest bookstores in London. But he also has this like game stuff going on where he gets people from all over the world to fly in for a weekend, and everybody just plays games. He's very cool guy. So that's my games.
That's great. I love it.
I feel like I would like to paint a little bit more. I used to paint when I was like 16, 17, 18.
Painting is the best. It's so therapeutic. It's so good.
So, but again, like, how can I remind myself to play? You said you just had your VA schedule things. Anything else? Any other?
Yeah, I mean, like I do this, and like I said, I do this group once a week that is kind of, it started off as 10 people, right? And each week I do it to get what I want, which is to just have low stress fun for a couple of hours, just to balance out the amount of time that I choose to spend in front of a computer. It's been really great for me. And now there are like 180 people who are subscribed to these hangouts that I do in Zilker Park. So it kind of took on a life of its own, and everything kind of starts off small that way. But make a commitment to yourself, a weekly commitment where you do this one thing every week. Like you do your meetups. And for my recess meetups, when I was first getting started, I remember there were 2 weeks in a row where no one came. And I was like, man, maybe this is just stupid. Maybe it's like kind of a juvenile thing that people are like laughing about behind my back. But, now I've been doing it for over a year and a half, I think. And I get people who come who I've never met before. I don't know who they are. I had one guy last week who said, he's like, I've come to these twice. I didn't know where you guys were, so I actually missed it. But just the fact that you have it, it's changed how I've behaved throughout the week. I emphasize, like, I get why you do this, how easy it is to burn out, how easy it is to just spend the week by yourself, to come home from work and turn on Netflix and stare at Tinder and just be by yourself staring at these screens, thinking or posting stuff on Facebook and getting this pseudo sense of connection, right? I mean, Facebook has 1 billion people on there because we want to be connected to each other. People want to connect. And so do one thing a week. Start off small where you're connecting with people in a way that you haven't connected. That fights off that loneliness, that prevents, that mitigates against that isolation, right? Because that's what life is about. Life is about the two things, which my friend Tucker Max repeatedly says, is the two things that matter in life is the warmth of the relationships that you have to your friends, family, and community, and the work that you do that helps other people. and we do our best work when we're at play.
This has been amazing. Guys, if you've enjoyed this interview, please go to Amazon, check out Play It Away. And, when you like something, if you read a book, you listen to a podcast, you see a movie that inspires you, that you get something out of, please take those 2-3 minutes to write a review, because it means the world to the person that's dedicated part of their life to create it for you. Charlie, where can we get more information about your meetup? Not your meetup group, but your group play. Is it in San Francisco, Austin?
It's in Austin, Texas.
Okay.
You can, if you look up the Recess Project on Facebook, you can check it out and see what I do on there. Otherwise, I'd encourage you to start one in your own city. You don't need me. Go for it. I'm not going to sue you for using the name The Recess Project either.
So you haven't created a franchise out of it yet. You might be getting quite a lot of emails from the listeners wanting to set up their franchise.
Right. That might be a thing someday, but for the time being, set up your own get-togethers with friends and take charge. The world needs more of this. We need to be more connected with each other and more supportive. So go for it.
Thank you so much. This has been amazing. And I look forward to meeting up with you soon.
Likewise. Thanks, Erlen.
This podcast is brought to you by MrOutsource.com. Outsourcing to the Philippines done for you. Mr. Outsource is a recruitment company matching busy entrepreneurs with Filipino virtual assistants, so you can have the time to focus on what's important.